Good day, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, A Strong ECM for Digital Transformation. I'm Vivek Vij from Datamatics and will be the host for the webinar today. The presenter for webinar today is Ulhas Kulkarni, Head of Microsoft Practice at Datamatics Global Services Limited. Ulhas Kulkarni is a dynamic leader with 25 years of rich experience for formulating and deploying IT and ECM strategy for organizations across the multiple verticals. Before we start the webinar, would like to remind you of a few pointers. All the attendees will be on mute mode. You may type in your question in Q&A box. Answers to all the questions will be addressed at appropriate section slides. Now, I would like to invite Ulhas to take over the webinar. Over to you, Ulhas.
Thanks, Vivek, and hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Here we will see how a strong enterprise content management system is essential for building a digital enterprise. We will see how ECM and other components are extremely important and how digital intelligence is influencing our day-to-day life. We will cover what are the strong expectations that we could have for the current generation enterprise content management system, and in case if the migration or upgrade of ECM is inevitable, then what are the basics about ECM as well as ECM migration that you should be aware of so that you are able to do that effectively. Now, we know we are undergoing digital transformation for last few years, and digital intelligence is influencing our day-to-day life at personal as well as professional level. Any option of not riding this digital wave? I would say no. We have seen that in last few years there are many Fortune 500 companies which dropped out of the list mainly because of the delayed decision on riding this wave of digital transformation. On the other hand, there's positive news as well. There are a lot of digital startups who could find their way smoothly and easily in this top 500 companies. So let's take it up with a practical example. I'm taking a very simple and very generic example from retail domain. The intention is because people would be able to relate that easily, but then whatever learnings that we would have from this will be very easily applicable to your respective domains. Now consider a case where you have a retail chain which is selling multiple brands and wide range of products. It has multiple outlets spread out throughout the continent, and it has hundreds and thousands of customers. Now consider a case when a particular customer who is actively involved in purchasing from multiple outlets, his name is John, and he is passing by one of the outlets of the retail chain. Consider a case wherein he immediately gets a message on his mobile wherein he gets information about a certain deal which is going on in the nearest outlet, and it is related to the product that he is genuinely interested in along with the relevant details. What will happen? The chances of John going there and making the purchase will go multiple folds. Similarly, it will be applicable to hundreds and thousands of Johns who are active customers of this retail chain. Consider another case where John is sitting cozy at his home working on his mobile, and suddenly he gets a message which is resolution of some concern that John had raised in some forum, casually speaking with his friends in some forum. What will happen? John will be extremely happy customer. Similarly, John keeps getting information about something he is genuinely interested in on regular basis, with an option of he giving his feedback and view on regular basis. What will happen? Engaged customer. And engaged customer will increase the possibility of satisfied customer, which will finally add to the revenues and the top line of the organization. This is how this retail chain is working. Now, how is it able to do that? Clearly, this organization has some system which is able to perform very efficiently. It is able to locate the geographical location of John. It is able to trigger certain action moment John is in vicinity of a particular outlet. The system is able to very clearly identify what John would be genuinely interested in purchasing, and system is able to correlate in real time about what are the deals going on for that particular product in the outlet within which vicinity John is there right now. And it is happening in real time, and it is happening for hundreds and thousands of Johns who are the customers. So this system is basically effectively helping the organization to give the required information in time. Second thing is, the system is very effectively able to identify what John is genuinely interested in. The sources could be anything. John would have given certain feedback to the retail chain. He would have sent certain mails, certain transactions done in the past. On the other hand, John would have spoken about this in other public forums like Facebook, Twitter. He would have spoken about that in multiple forums. There are n number of possibilities, but the system is able to take this intelligence collectively from multiple sources, analyze that, and come up with a concrete information saying that it is clearly it's clearly something that he would be interested in. Now, apart from getting this, the source of data being huge, the processing requires huge computing power. We are speaking about hundreds and thousands of Johns in real time. How would that be done? Clearly, the system is smart and latest enough to use the cloud computing technology available right now, wherein the infrastructure is scalable up and down on demand. When you run a survey, you need more capacity, you scale up on demand. When you don't need that excess capacity, you scale down. Some sort of such smartness is available in that system. The system is smart enough to communicate with hundreds and thousands of customers using various possible sources like handsets, iPads, iPhones, laptops. So it is omni-channel, and it is using that technology effectively. Now, whatever we have spoken so far has been mainly regarding the availability of the intelligence, which is definitely credible. But there is need for a big supporting system to make that happen. There has to be strong business processes, applications within the organization which are using this intelligence for performing effectively, so that finally whatever is committed to John is delivered as well. And this system that we have been speaking about is the ECM, or Enterprise Content Management System, which is making happen whatever we have spoken just now, and it is basically heart or plays pivotal role in any digital enterprise.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ulhas. There is a question from the audience. Does this retail domain example of digital enterprise and digital intelligence apply equally well to other domains as well? Is having a strong ECM sufficient to build a digital enterprise?
Thanks, Vivek. That's a good question. So, as we said, irrespective of what business we are speaking about, we are going to have customers there. When you have customers, engaging the customers in our operations is extremely important to understand what they actually want. Ensuring that you are providing what the customer wants ensures customer satisfaction, and that all adds to the most important activity for which any business runs is increasing their top line, increasing their revenue. So the example that we spoke about is speaking about customer engagement, customer satisfaction, and revenue generation, which is integral part of any business, and IT has equally strong role to play irrespective of the verticals. The level of complexity and level of impact might vary slightly from domain to domain, but definitely it is applicable everywhere. And as I mentioned earlier, I took this example for the sake of simplicity and ease of understanding, but I'm sure people from different domains will be able to relate to their respective domains and understand the corresponding impact. What was the second question, Vivek?
Okay, and I recall that.
So you spoke about whether having just a ECM is sufficient. I would say no. ECM plays a pivotal role. It is providing you the information and intelligence in real time. But unless there's a backup system to use that intelligence correctly, you will not be able to achieve your final objectives. Hence, ECM is definitely a strong step in that direction, but it is not everything. So we have seen that ECM has evolved over the period of time. I'm sure the enterprise content management system existed in one form or the other since last decades, but over the period of time, as we could see, it has become more and more effective and has assumed a pivotal role in working of any business enterprise. If you look at the traditional ECM, then it used to be generally considered as some repository lying on the backyard of the business, wherein it was considered as a final resting place for documents and artifacts, and it used to be referred only for historical purposes with main intent of having it to fulfill the regulatory and legal requirements. But now we have seen that with the advancement of technologies and imbibing that technologies, ECM has become more and more stronger. Thanks to cloud computing, because of which it is able to handle huge amounts of data in real time by scaling up and scaling down. Thanks to mobility, the accessibility of this information and this source of data is become more and more effective and in real time, irrespective of the location. Thanks to analytics skill, irrespective of huge data, it is able to arrive at certain clear intelligence based on which certain actions could be taken for business benefit. Thanks to the technological advancement of the platform, wherein it has become more and more reliable, more and more available, and its reach has also increased to within the organization as well as beyond organization. I recall one ECM implementation that we had done recently. We had implemented SharePoint Online, wherein during the implementation we realized that they do have SAP ERP system within premise, and the information is extremely important for certain business processes. So thanks to the business connectivity services available with SharePoint Online, we could integrate SharePoint along with SAP, and we could complete the entire business process irrespective of one being on cloud and other being on premise. So we could see that ECM has become more and more important, and of course for your digital transformation journey, having a strong ECM is extremely important. Now we saw the features of the ECM earlier. Now what are the business benefits or business features that business expectations that ECM should provide for handling the current generation of business requirements? So one thing extremely important and expectation from the ECM is it should act as a reliable single source of truth within the organization. So whatever information related to the business, customers, employees, anything, we should be able to go to the ECM and it should be able to provide a reliable and single source. What that means is whatever are the possible sources of information related to the problem that we have been speaking about, the ECM should be strong enough to gather that intelligence from there to whatever intrinsic value it is, do the analysis and give a single unambiguous outcome so that actions could be taken based on that. Now, what that means is whether the source of data is lying within the organization, outside the organization, doesn't matter. If it is lying in structured format, unstructured format, doesn't matter. Within the organization, it could be lying in the databases, it could be lying in the emails, documents. Externally, it could be lying with the business partners. Unstructured formats, it could be lying in any social media forums anywhere, and believe me, the unstructured content constitutes more than 80% of the source of data, and unfortunately the intrinsic value in the unstructured information is very small, so you have to churn huge amounts of data to get certain information, but that can't be ignored, and the ECM should be able to do everything in the background, process that, and give a single concrete information so that actions could be taken based on that. Now, who all should be able to access this outcome from the ECM? It could be employees, it could be business processes, it could be applications within the organization, and they should be able to do that seamlessly and in real time. In addition to that, for processing this huge amount of data, definitely it should be able to make use of the cloud computing environment. It should be able to deliver that with the help of the mobility option that is available. So these are the basic business requirements that you would have from ECM. And in case you can evaluate your existing ECM against these points, and if there are any deviations, then we can definitely say that it's time for you to take a step back and think about whether the existing setup is good enough for you in the long run. Now, depending on your business requirements, depending upon the criticalities of the digital operations which are not being supported by ECM, the time frame could be decided. But one thing is sure, that it's time for you to think about considering some change in your ECM platform.
Ulhas, there's one more question which has come up. If our ECM is not providing all these features, then the only option left is ECM migration. And when do we plan this migration? How should we plan this migration?
I think it's a good question. As I mentioned some time back, if there are any gaps between your existing ECM and the expectations that we spoke about just now, then one thing is there that you need to start thinking in that direction. But whether you should do it now or later, we can't confirm that right away. It depends on case-by-case basis. So whatever we are speaking right now, we are doing at a conceptual level so that at least we know what direction we should take. But once we decide to take some direction, there has to be deep diving on case-by-case basis under expert guidance. And based on your business, based on your current setup, based on your future expectations, we will have to decide when to do the migration, how to do the migration, whether it has to be in steps, whether it has to be a big bang approach, and then you get into the technical details on what platforms and other things. So I hope it answers your question.
Very much. Very much, Ulhas. Thank you.
Okay, great. So now consider a case wherein either now or tomorrow, later, maybe you need to do or migrate from existing ECM to the new platform. There are certain basics that we should be aware of. Again, I'm saying these are more at conceptual level, but definitely applicable in almost all the cases. And knowing that will help us in taking right direction. But when we are doing actual implementation, we have to dive deeper into your particular environment under expert guidance to take concrete steps. Now, when we speak about ECM, we know that ECM is fairly complex. It has multiple components, it has multiple applications, multiple sites, a lot of workflows, forms, and a number of things. But if you take a step further, then it all boils down to certain data and certain information which is lying as either content, XML or data, mostly in some database and in some special cases in certain file servers. So we could see I'm trying to simplify the situation by getting rid of certain information which is not required so far as planning your migration is concerned. So whatever complex system that we spoke about, we are speaking about some level of data and some level of information which is lying in the database or file servers. Now tomorrow when you plan to do certain migration, essentially what you need to do is just migrate this data and information from one system to another. I'm not saying it will cover entire migration, but I'm 100% sure that it will cover most of the ECM that we have spoken so far. When you migrate, you will migrating some data and content in raw format, or when you migrate the information, it will basically give certain instructions to be replicated on the target platform for doing certain actions, maybe for recreating a form layout, or maybe for recreating the navigations, version history, access rights, things like that, which are stored as an information in XML format and they need to be migrated. So irrespective of what platform you are on right now and what platform you will be moving, essentially this is something that you would be mostly migrating. So how do you design your migration approach? Believe me, migration is an excellent opportunity for you to do house cleaning and getting rid of unwanted information, unwanted artifacts that we have unconsciously collected over a decade. That's not an easy activity, but this is excellent opportunity for us to do that. Most of the information is being carried, most of the artifacts are being carried because of lack of information. So what we would suggest is, first step that you would be taking while deciding your migration approach is to ensure what should be migrated and what should not be migrated. Most probably you will be moving to the cloud. Taking unwanted stuff to the cloud is even more risky in terms of longer time and cost involved in that. On the other hand, information gathered through multiple users, multiple applications is very difficult to sort out. There are a lot of tools that are available, and we have also built in many cases so that we are able to run those scripts to get basic information about the artifacts that you have with you to take elementary decision on whether we should proceed with them or not. Recently, we concluded a project for big organization, huge migration project where they had multiple forms and multiple sites, huge amount of data. Say, for example, they had close to 4,000 sites available. And during the migration planning, the plan was revolving around how we should phase the entire migration project to cover these 5,000 sites. What we suggested is let's run a tool that we have. Of course, we will be customizing it for your requirement. And let's do some sanity check of your existing system from utility perspective, like how active those sites are, how often they have been accessed, how often they have been upgraded, and things like that. In the first stage itself, we were absolutely clear that we would be migrating less than 50% of them. Subsequently, then we had done a small pilot wherein we refined this discovery tool further, and believe me, finally we ended up migrating only 15%, 15% of the sites. The migration is over 2 months back, and there's absolutely nobody asking about the earlier site. Of course, this decision is not purely based on our tools. Our tools will give you elementary ideas. Subsequently, you will have to approach the respective stakeholders and get confirmation on scrapping those sites. But then what happens is, because of such precaution being taken at the right time, you are able to save huge amount of unnecessary stuff being carried forward, mainly to the cloud, where you continue paying for that. Second thing, most important thing is apart from doing this analysis, it's good to run some sort of pilot in the beginning itself. There would be a lot of tools available, a lot of solutions available in the market, but then they need to be customized for each requirement separately. Now, if you look at the data and information which represents the entire existing ECM, then they can be broadly classified into two cases. One, where there is a strong API support available to access that, and then other whether there is no API support available. The API supported data and information is the easiest chunk, and fortunately more than 50% of the entire migration. Sometimes it goes to 60 to 65% of the entire migration. That's the easiest one, can be automated. The thumb rule for any automation apart from running a pilot is basically to automate to the extent possible. Even the incremental automation of few percentages make a huge difference because of the high volumes involved. And that's the reason pilot is extremely important. Now, when we start our automation journey, we could see that migrating this API supported data and content can be done very easily. There are a lot of standard tools available in the market for migrating for popular products, but there would be some not very widely used ECM platforms for which this tool may not be available, but then it's very easily possible to build such tool. We have also handled many such cases where we have built our own to handle this because it easily gives you first 55 to 60% of automation. Then comes the content which is not accessible through API. There it is lot more customization based on the users, and during the pilot stage, there are scripts easily available which can be written for migrating this content. Of course, they need to be tested and thoroughly tested. So basically when we decide the pilot, it should take proper representation of the entire scope of the work which is there, so that scripts are easily applicable to the rest of the stuff that is to be migrated subsequently. Based on our experience, we can say that very easily say that this also constitutes about 10 to 15% of portion of the entire stuff to be migrated. So if we speak about the API supported data and information and not supported information, if we do that proper automation during the pilot phase, then very easily the level of automation can cross beyond 70 to 75%. And that will be making huge difference in the entire execution project. That's why pilot is extremely important and should be done with the keen intent of automating as much as possible. Then comes the specific portion of workflows, customizations, forms, which are very specific to the particular setup. And that's what is to be deliberated in detail to see whether something could be done to increase that automation. In most of the cases, yes, it is possible, but it needs to be dived deeper on case-by-case basis. And whatever incremental automation you could do, you should not lose that opportunity. And then comes the testing. Testing is very easily automation testing is very easily possible there, because you know the existing system, you know the destination system, you know what are the changes required, and doing that will easily add further automation to the entire migration process. So if I take end-to-end process, then very easily we can achieve at least 60% automation, assuming that there's a huge customization involved in the given setup, but most probably it will cross 75 to 80% very easily. So I could recall one recent project that we have done wherein we had migrated from one standard platform to SharePoint Online. Now this standard platform was very popular and there were multiple tools available for that. Now when we have multiple tools available for API supported data migration, then there are certain considerations extremely important before you take the final decision of what tool to take. In some cases, I mean, it depends on the licensing options available with the tool. Say, for example, if you are migrating huge amount of data and the tool is charging you based on the amount of data migrated, then it is a point that you need to think. There are certain cases wherein we had written our own scripts to give a cost-effective solution, but what happens most is writing your own script gives you flexibility of customization for the particular requirement. So what we had done is we used one standard tool for migrating the API supported data, and in this particular case, it gave roughly 60% of automation. After that, the most important thing that we did was the way we handled the data which was not supported by API. Now, existing platform didn't have any APIs to support that type of information, mainly the page layouts, mainly the low-level access rights, those type of things. But we could write scripts, particularly for this requirement, test them thoroughly during the pilot phase, and subsequently implement that. So we could see that overall we could achieve close to 80% of automation, and since the volumes involved were very high, this made a big difference. So this is the conceptual way in which we should plan for the migration, so that subsequently we are able to do that. The turnaround time is fast, accuracy is high, and then you get the actual returns on the investments made.
Ulas, there is one more question which has come up is, does it mean that it is always possible to achieve high level of automation in ECM migration, irrespective of source and target platform?
Good question, and I anticipated that question. That's why I highlighted in the beginning. We are speaking here at a conceptual level, irrespective of any specific technologies or any specific platforms. So I can very easily say that irrespective of what is the source platform, what is the target platform, as long as you are migrating your stuff, this approach is very well applicable there. There are certain things which are specific for the given setup that need to be addressed during the initial requirement analysis phase and the pilot phase. But one thing is there, this will address most of the concerns and most of the migration requirement, and hence conceptually, if you follow this approach, you will be going in the right direction. But as I said, on case-by-case basis, you will have to dive deeper when you are actually formulating the plan. Towards the end also, you will realize that the plan was in sync with the conceptual direction that you got based on whatever we discussed just now. And I would suggest doing that under certain expert guidance.
Thank you, Ulas. Ulas, is automation possible even in the area of workflow customization?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't dive deeper into that, especially because I didn't want to get into any specific areas. We were putting it at conceptual level with widespread application. But I can take this based on a few of the recent cases that we have done. Here also, when you are evaluating the workflows, customizations, forms, which are specific for a particular installation, then still there is possibility of having those extra percentages of automation done. Now, what we will have to do here is, and what we did in our cases is, basically we identified certain repetitive, predictable activities, and we used robotics for automation of that. So instead of somebody doing it manually, wherever it was predictable, wherever it was repetitive in nature, we used robotics there, and we performed that activity to achieve those extra automation. On top of that, we had strong laws in place wherein exceptions were handled, and in some cases, in a supervised way, the system learned, wherein somebody would give the instructions for the subsequent execution on whatever failed earlier. And in some cases, we could achieve even unsupervised self-learning by the tool. So basically, to answer your question, yes, it is possible to automate even that, but it has to be done on case-by-case basis, with a clear intent of automating to the extent possible, looking at the benefits coming out of the huge volumes to be migrated. Now, based on our experience, I would like to highlight certain challenges that one should be aware of in the beginning itself so that we can take benefit of that during our planning and implementation. One thing is extremely important to know that migration is not an IT activity. It's the entire organization that is getting affected in this process, and hence there has to be involvement of respective stakeholders and business users from all the departments, from the conceptualization stage till planning, implementation, and post-implementation. If we do that, then only it is possible for you to have not only the successful implementation, but real adoption of the system, which is the final aim behind entire exercise. When the project is being actually executed, then may not be the all departments, but the representative from your side should be actively involved with the execution team in regular meetings, in regular retrospectives, planning, demos, everywhere, so that any changes, any deviations could be tracked, could be caught and tracked in the right time so that there's no big impact. Believe me, any migration, we are handling huge volumes of data, sites, forms, applications, and number of things. And any mistake at any stage will have cascading effect. And that's the reason active involvement is extremely important to get successful implementation and required benefits out of that. We spoke about importance of piloting earlier. One important thing to be done during piloting is basically fine-tuning your solution for the bigger execution. But it doesn't stop there. There has to be continuous improvement of the solution throughout the execution. And execution generally happens in batch sizes. How you size the batch or bucket is extremely important. What we should say is, in the beginning, the bucket size should be smaller so that till the tool gets fine-tuned, the repercussions are low. Selecting a bucket size, selecting the content of the bucket is also extremely important because they should be similar in nature so that tomorrow when you are doing implementation, the freeze time activity is also extremely important. Freeze time is when you are freezing any changes to the existing system, and that has direct impact on the business users and the business itself. So whatever artifacts are going to be worked upon in a particular bucket should be possible to have similar freeze time for them during the implementation and testing subsequently. So sizing the bucket, scheduling the buckets properly, and handling the exception and deciding the freeze time, these are all practical things which impact the business users, and they need to be thoroughly planned and consciously tracked throughout the execution. Mainly the exceptions should be kept separate from the bucket execution. Like recently we concluded a project wherein we had just one site out of the 1,000 odd sites that we migrated, which was totally different from the rest of the lot. It had more than 30,000 pages. It carried more than 1 terabyte of data, all business critical data. So we should be able to identify such exceptions and keep them separate of the buckets so that the bucket as well as these critical sites, they are not affecting each other and they are handled separately. I mean, these are just some tips that I'm giving from our practical experience, but those would be extremely helpful for subsequent successful implementation of such projects. There are business dynamics coming up. Say, for example, as the example that I mentioned, wherein we had initially thought of 5,000 plus sites to be migrated, but because of our discovery tool, we realized that less than 1,000 sites need to be migrated. Moment we gave that information, we planned the buckets, we started the execution, but suddenly business realized that since the active sites have gone down, why not complete the execution faster so that by end of say June of this year, the licenses for the earlier platforms were due for renewal. Because of lesser number of sites, we could see that we could move from the platform before that deadline. So why not crash the schedule and do it faster. Now, initial plan was to complete that by September of the month. The total duration was 9 months. Somewhere during the 4th month of execution, the business came back saying that, can you please do that? We had option of saying no, but then since we had planned that in such a way, what we had to do is, since our tool had reached a stage of perfection, so adding parallel buckets was easily possible at that stage. Had it been in the beginning stages, we won't have taken that risk. But since we saw that our tool had reached the acceptable level of perfection, we just put additional buckets with additional teams. All other processes were absolutely clear, and we could very easily achieve that deadline that business had requested us for. So these all things, they definitely help, and one should be clear that such business dynamics, they play a role. This is just one example that I mentioned. When you are touching the big organization, there are many such things that are coming up, which if you accommodate it, then you can help the business without any impact on the execution of the project. Of course, when we executed this, we kept the exception aside, clearly communicating and highlighting the requirements, but then the normal stuff was migrated successfully without any problems.
Now I come to the last part of the discussion.
Ulas, we have a question here. Does this migration approach works even for a platform upgrade? For an example, if somebody wants to migrate from SharePoint to 2010 to SharePoint Online.
Yeah, good question. Again, we are getting into specific platforms. So something similar to what I said earlier, since this approach is irrespective of what is the source and target platform, it has applicability in this case also. So when we are speaking about SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint Online migration, of course, there are multiple ways to upgrade the system, but then here also, I would recommend taking the similar approach, because you are moving from premise to cloud, and ensuring that you take only what is required of the cloud is equally applicable here. And whatever points, whatever approach that we said is equally applicable here as well. So I would say yes, it is very much applicable in this case as well.
Thank you.
Now, doing all these things is extremely important, but the most important component of this entire system are the business users. They should be using this system, and there's generally resistance for change. People are more comfortable with what they have been using for so many years, and in a way they have built their expertise on that system. So certain things, of course, I will keep it at higher level, but certain things which are extremely important to be planned and addressed in advance itself to ensure that you get proper adoption of the new ECM that you are targeting to implement, as well as you are able to get the maximum returns from whatever huge investments in terms of resources that you are doing into the entire assignment that we spoke about. So how do we handle the user? One point I highlighted earlier itself, since they are the business users, involve them since beginning, from the conceptualization till the implementation and post-implementation. The user experience should not get affected. So mainly the interaction of most of the business users with the ECM is through their business applications that they use day in and day out. Now ECM works in the background. One thing that we can do consciously, I'm just giving one example, is that the look and feel of the business applications, the way they were interacting with the earlier ECM, try to retain them to the extent possible the same way. The look and feel, the flow, the features, the layout, everything. If you maintain the same way, there are higher chances of users adapting that. Since the ECM is changing in the background, let's not change the layout as well. Or user experience, the way user was interacting with the system, maintain the same way. I'm not saying don't make any changes, but any changes that you make to the business applications, do it based on the feedback and confirmation from the business users. If we do that, then that again will ensure higher adoption of the new ECM. Training, the main reason for resistance is lack of knowledge. So if we provide proper training, apart from involving them extensively, I'm sure the resistance will definitely go down. At organization level, there has to be clear-cut strategy and policy, because many of these business users will not just be consuming the information from ECM, they would be actively updating and adding information in real time on regular basis. So there should be a clear-cut strategy and policy on how it is to be managed and clearly communicated to the respective users and user groups. And of course, on top of that, we know that it's going to churn huge amounts of data on regular basis. So strong governance is extremely important. So these were the points that I wanted to highlight. So quickly, I'll recap. A strong ECM is extremely important for building a digital enterprise. Having a strong ECM, you can evaluate your existing ECM, and if you don't have that, I think you should strongly evaluate whether you should move to the new ECM. If you decide to migrate to the new enterprise content management system, then there are certain basics that you should definitely know, irrespective of who is going to implement this entire migration project. I have shared our experiences, our challenges based on our vast experience in this field, and I hope that will be helpful for you in your ECM and digital transformation journey. My best wishes to you for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ullas, for an insightful presentation. The webinar was indeed very engaging. I think we all agree a strong ECM is very important for digital transformation. If you have any queries, please feel free to reach out to us at business@datamatics.com, and we will surely come back to you at the earliest. On this note, we would like to conclude today's session. Thank you all for your valuable time and attention. Have a great day. Thank you.